Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something that's really at the heart of how you learn anything: interest.
Yeah, it's fundamental.
We've got a stack of research here, particularly the work of Suzanne Heedy and others in educational psychology. And, well, our goal is to pull out the key insights about how what interests you affects how you read and what you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Think of this as your shortcut to understanding how to make your learning more effective and, honestly, way more engaging.
Exactly. We all know that feeling, right? Being completely absorbed in something you're reading, and then the flip side, trying to focus on material that just feels like, a total slog.
Totally.
What's going on in your brain during those different experiences? That's what we're going to explore today.
And it turns out there isn't just one kind of interest. The research points to two main types. First, there's individual interest, your own personal, long-lasting passions, the subjects you naturally gravitate toward.
You write the stuff you just like.
Then there's situational interest, which is sparked by something in the immediate environment, like the text itself or how the information is presented.
Yeah, the thing that catches your eye in the moment.
We're going to look at how these two different kinds of interest impact how well you understand and remember what you read.
And this isn't exactly a brand new idea. I mean, way back in 1982, Heedy and her colleagues actually published a paper with a really telling question in the title. That's important, but is it interesting?
Ah, I like that. Straight to the point.
Right. That early work already suggested that just presenting information clearly wasn't the whole picture when it came to learning. Something can be really important, but if it doesn't grab your interest, how much of it are you really going to take in?
Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper into how this idea evolved. Back in the early 80s, when people were studying reading and learning, the main focus was really on how the information itself was structured.
Yeah, the cognitive side, the text structure.
The idea was that if a text was well organized, clear main points, supporting details, you'd naturally remember the most important stuff.
Yeah.
It was all about the cognitive process of taking in and organizing that information.
Right. The emphasis was very much on the text and your brain's ability to process it logically. Things like emotions or how interested you were in the topic were often seen as secondary, if they were considered at all.
But then researchers like Heedy and others started saying, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. Their early research started showing that how interesting people found the information was also a big factor in how well they understood and remembered it.
It wasn't just about the structure of the text. Affective factors mattered.
Right. And that led to a lot of research trying to understand what interest actually is and how it works. That's where this distinction between individual and situational interests started to become, well, clearer.
On one hand, researchers looked at those long-term personal preferences. For example, early studies looking at how even very young kids play showed that if a child was really interested in, say, cars, they'd focus more on car-related play and remember more about it.
So their natural interest was like a powerful magnet for their attention and memory.
Exactly. These individual interests act like built-in motivators, pulling our focus. And then, on the other hand, there was research looking at what makes the material itself interesting.
What is it about certain stories or pieces of information that just grabs your attention?
Yeah, what makes things interesting, and what happens in your brain and behavior when you are interested.
And some of the early examples of short pieces of text that researchers found really captured students' interest are quite revealing, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Things like the huge gorilla smashed the bus with its fist, or when a fly moves its wings about 200 times in a second, you hear a buzzing sound.
Okay, I could see that. Action, surprise.
And even the gorilla leader is called a silverback because of the gray hair that runs down his back. Just intriguing details. You can see in those simple examples how elements of action, surprise, or, interesting facts can immediately draw you in.
Okay, so we see how the field shifted to include interest. Now, let's really break down the difference between individual interest and situational interest for everyone.
Right. So individual interest is that interest that develops over time. It lasts longer, and it's usually linked to you gaining more knowledge about the topic and also valuing that knowledge more.
Like the history buff example.
Exactly. Think about someone who's really into history. Over the years, they've probably read a lot, maybe visited historical sites. Their knowledge has grown, and they likely place a high value on learning more about the past. That's individual interest at work.
So it's like a snowball effect. The more you're interested, the more you learn and the more you value it, which fuels your interest further. Kind of a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. Now, situational interest is that immediate spark. It's triggered by something right there in front of you. It could be a captivating headline, a surprising fact in a report, or a really engaging way of presenting information, maybe a great graphic or something.
Hmm.
The key difference here is that this initial spark might not have those long-term effects on your knowledge or values. It grabs you in the moment.
Like when you're scrolling through, I don't know, news headlines or social media, and something just jumps out at you. You click, you find it fascinating while you're reading, but it might not lead you to become an expert on, say, the mating habits of tree frogs.
Precisely. And here's a really important point. Situational interest doesn't always mean you're feeling happy or positive about the information.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Think about watching a documentary about, I don't know, sharks or snakes. You might find it incredibly interesting how they hunt, how they survive, but that doesn't mean you suddenly like snakes.
Definitely not. Still interesting, though.
Right. Researchers have even used the example of medical students dissecting cadavers. It can be a very interesting and even a powerful learning experience, but the overall feeling might not be one of enjoyment?
Yeah, that's a powerful example.
So it's crucial to remember that being interested in something and liking it are two different things.
That's a really important distinction. So while these two types of interests are different, do they ever connect or influence each other? Is there overlap?
Absolutely. They're not completely separate silos. First off, both individual and situational interest lead to what researchers call the psychological state of interest.
Okay, what's that?
Think of this as your brain's engaged mode when you're in it. Your attention is sharper, your brain is working harder cognitively, you're more likely to stick with the task, and there's usually some kind of feeling associated with it, an affective component.
So, whether it's a long-term passion or a fleeting moment of curiosity, when you're interested, your brain is basically in a more active state, more focused, more engaged.
Exactly. Second, both types of interest come from the interaction between you and something in your environment. They're content specific.
Meaning?
Meaning, you might have a strong individual interest in science, but find a particular science textbook, maybe presented in a really dry, boring way, completely uninteresting in that specific situation. It's not just about you or just about the material. It's how the two come together.
It's that connection, that interaction that sparks the interest.
Got it. And thirdly, and this is key for learning, individual and situational interests can and do interact. Researchers suggest they can be especially important when the other one is weak.
Oh,
For instance, if you have a strong individual interest in a subject, it can help you push through reading material about it that isn't very well written, or engaging your underlying passion keeps you going. You power through the boring bits.
okay, I've done that.
And on the flip side, a really well-presented or fascinating piece of writing, great situational interest, can grab your attention and boost your performance even if you didn't have much initial individual interest in the topic.
Ah, so situational interest can be the on-ramp to deeper engagement, even if you weren't into it before.
Precisely. It's like that initial spark can ignite your motivation even if the long-term fuel wasn't already there. And research even shows that situational interest can, over time, develop into a more lasting individual interest. That initial spark of curiosity can actually grow into genuine passion.
Now, the research also talks about this idea of topic interest. Where does that fit in with these two main types, individual and situational?
That's a bit of a tricky one, actually. Researchers have debated whether it's more like situational or individual interest. Topic interest is basically the interest you feel when a specific topic or theme is presented, say, the title Black Holes and Quasars.
Oh, okay, can see how that could fall into either category, yeah.
Exactly. Someone who has a long-standing individual interest in astronomy is likely to find that topic interesting because it connects with their passion.
Obvious connection there.
But someone who doesn't know much about astronomy might still find black holes and quasars interesting because the titles suggest something novel, maybe a little dangerous or unknown. Those are more situational factors. Intrigue, mystery.
So the same topic can grab different people for different reasons, depending on their background and what aspects of the topic stand out to them. One person sees astronomy, another sees mystery.
Exactly. And research that has looked specifically at topic interest, using things like interactive computer programs, has found that it really does influence how we feel about the material, how long we persist with it, and ultimately, how much we learn.
Makes sense.
Since we usually encounter a topic like a book title or a lecture subject right at the beginning, topic interest seems to play a really important initial role in how we engage with the learning process. It's the first hook.
This is all interesting in theory, but what's the hard evidence? Does being interested actually make a measurable difference in how well you read and learn?
Oh, yeah. There's a good amount of research showing that both individual and situational interest have a real positive impact on comprehension and recall. How well you understand and remember what you read.
For both kids and adults.
Yeah, this has been shown in studies with children and also with college students. For example, one study, Schra and colleagues back in '95, found that interest could account for a significant chunk, around 12% of the variance in how much text people recalled.
Wow, 12%. That's not trivial at all.
Not at all. Think about it, simply being more interested can give you almost like a 12% learning bonus. It's not just about feeling better while you're reading, it actually translates into better learning outcomes.
That's a huge takeaway.
Absolutely. And some research suggests that interest might even affect the kind of learning that happens, not just the quantity.
What do you mean, deeper learning?
Yeah, exactly. When you're interested, you might be more likely to really dig deep into the material, make connections between different ideas, and organize the information in a more meaningful way in your mind, influencing recall of main ideas, better cognitive organization.
So it's not just about memorizing facts. It seems to motivate you to go beyond the surface and really understand the underlying concepts, the big picture.
Precisely. It promotes deeper processing, not just surface level stuff.
Okay, that's key.
Yeah.
Now, let's switch gears a bit. If we know interest is so important, what are the things that actually make reading material more interesting in the moment? What sparks that situational interest?
That's the million-dollar question for educators and writers, right?
Yeah.
A lot of research has looked into this. Early on, they found that certain text characteristics were important. Things like novelty, something new or unexpected.
It's a pride factor.
Yeah. Intensity, concreteness, making it less abstract, and vivid descriptions that help you create mental images. Things that really paint a picture.
So things that kind of jolt you and make you pay attention and also help you visualize what you're reading. Makes sense.
Exactly. Later research, like that Schra study again, identified several key sources of situational interest in a text.
Okay, like what?
Things like how easy it is to understand, ease of comprehension, how well it flows and connects ideas, text cohesion, how vivid the language is, how much it involves you as a reader, engagement, whether it makes you feel any emotions, evocative reactions, and whether it connects to what you already know, prior knowledge.
That's quite a list.
It is. What's interesting is that not all of these things necessarily have the same impact on how interesting you find something, and they often work kind of independently.
Right. And didn't they find that knowledge alone isn't enough?
Yeah, exactly. Just knowing a lot about a topic doesn't automatically make a text about it interesting. You could be an expert in something, but still find a particular article about it incredibly dull if it's poorly written or presented.
So familiarity doesn't necessarily equal fascination.
Good point. Precisely. Other research looking specifically at informational science texts found similar factors like clarity and vividness, but also highlighted the importance of novelty again, and also whether the information seems important or valuable to you.
The relevance factor.
Exactly. And there's also this idea from Harp and Mayer that when a text actually helps you understand something better, that increased comprehension itself can make it more interesting. Cognitive interest, they called it.
Ah, so the feeling of getting it is itself engaging. If you
Yeah.
can follow along and grasp the concepts, you're more likely to stay interested.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about the text itself, how the learning activity is set up, the materials that are used, the whole learning environment. These can all have a big impact on situational interest.
Like how a teacher presents a topic.
Yeah, or even something as simple as giving you a specific purpose for reading something can change how interesting you find it and how much you remember. If you're reading to find a specific answer, you're likely to find the sections that contain that answer more engaging.
That makes perfect sense. It adds a sense of purpose and relevance immediately.
Exactly. And other research has shown that making learning materials more meaningful may be a bit more challenging, but not too challenging. That's key, or personally relevant.
Connecting it to your own life or goals.
Yeah, that can also significantly boost interest. And importantly, you yourself can play a role. Self-regulation comes in. Even if something seems a bit dry at first, you can see the value in learning it. You can actively try to find ways to make it more engaging for yourself.
So we're not just passive recipients of interest. We can actually try to cultivate it to some extent. Find the angle that works for us.
Precisely. Even if a task seems initially boring, if you can find a reason why it matters to you, you can develop strategies to make it more interesting and therefore more effective for learning.
This is all really valuable for thinking about how to approach learning, both for ourselves and for teaching others. Now let's get into the really fascinating part. How does interest actually lead to better learning? What are the mechanisms? What's going on behind the scenes in our brains?
That's where the research gets a little more complex. And honestly, there are different ideas floating around. One possibility we touched on is that when you're interested in something, it prompts you to use deeper thinking strategies.
Right, engaging more actively.
You might be more likely to ask questions, connect the new information to what you already know, really think critically about it. And there's research that supports this idea, like Wade and colleagues found that when readers make more connections to their prior knowledge, they tend to be more interested in the material.
So interest in deeper processing might go hand in hand.
It's like interest flips a switch in your brain that says, okay, pay closer attention and think more deeply about this.
It activates a more engaged mode of processing.
Exactly. Another idea involves how our brains actually process different kinds of information. There's a theory, dual coding theory.
Okay.
It suggests we have two somewhat separate but interconnected systems for processing information. One for verbal information, words, and one for verbal information, words, and one for nonverbal or visual information, images.
Words and pictures, basically.
Kind of, yeah. When information is presented in a way that engages both, for example, using vivid language that creates strong mental images alongside the verbal text, it can lead to better understanding and memory because you're encoding it in two ways. Some researchers argue that interest, especially when it involves imagery and emotions, might tap into this dual way of processing information more
Yeah.
effectively.
That makes sense, especially for things like reading a captivating story where you can really picture the scenes and feel the emotions.
Yes, but this theory might not explain all the ways interest affects learning. For example, something that's novel or surprising can be very interesting, but it might not always create strong visual images.
Good point. A surprising statistic might not paint a picture, but still grab you. So there's likely more to it than just how we're encoding the information.
Exactly. And probably one of the most prominent ideas, championed by Hitty herself, is that attention is a key mediating variable.
Attention. Okay. How does that work?
Well, the argument is that when you're interested in something, your attention is automatically drawn to it. You don't have to consciously force yourself to focus. Your interest just pulls your attention in almost effortlessly.
So instead of having to actively decide, okay, focus on this sentence, interest kind of does the heavy lifting for you.
That's the idea. Heedy and others have pointed out that the kind of attention involved when you recognize something as structurally important in a text might be different from the kind of attention that's triggered by something interesting.
How so?
Well, identifying importance might require more conscious effort, more top-down control. But interest might trigger a more automatic, bottom-up capture of attention. It just grabs you. Heedy critiqued some earlier studies for assuming it was the same kind of attention mechanism at play.
Okay, so different kinds of attention.
Potentially, yes. And there's some fascinating research. McDaniel and colleagues did a study in 2000 that seems to support this idea of automatic attention. They looked at how quickly people reacted to other things while they were reading interesting versus boring material.
Reaction times. What do they find?
They found that people actually processed the interesting sentences faster, especially as they got further into the stories. Their reaction times to secondary tasks were quicker when reading high-interest stuff compared to low-interest stuff.
Faster processing. That seems counterintuitive, maybe.
Well, the interpretation was that interest allows for more efficient processing. Your brain isn't struggling as much. It's working more smoothly, leaving more mental resources available for other things, hence the faster reaction times. It's like interest streamlines your cognitive processing.
Wow. That's a really interesting finding. So it suggests that interest isn't just about feeling good. It actually makes your brain work in a more efficient way when you're engaging with the material. Less cognitive load, maybe?
Exactly. That's a strong possibility. And as we learn more about these processes, researchers are also developing new ways to measure interest as it's happening.
Instead of just asking afterwards?
Right. Traditional questionnaires might capture your expectations or your memory of being interested, but they don't show the dynamics. New methods involve tracking things like how people rate their interest level moment by moment as they read, tracking eye movements, looking at what they choose to read next, how long they spend on different parts, and even physiological measures linked to emotional responses.
Seeing a real-time picture.
Exactly. It gives us a much richer, more dynamic understanding of how interest ebbs and flows during a learning experience. And this kind of research is showing that initial spark of interest in a topic really can set the stage for more persistence, more positive emotions, and ultimately better recall. It tracks the whole process.
This has so many implications for how we approach learning, especially in education, right? How can we actually use this understanding of interest in the classroom or even in our own personal learning?
Well, the research really highlights how important your individual passions, your individual interests are for staying motivated and learning effectively over the long haul.
For
When you're genuinely interested in a topic, you're likely to be more engaged, persevere through challenges, use better learning strategies, and ultimately achieve better results. We see this all the time.
But as you said, trying to cater to every single person's individual interests all the time, especially in a classroom setting, can be really, really tough.
It's a huge practical challenge. You can't exactly have a completely customized curriculum for every student based on their specific hobbies or passions.
Unfeasible.
Exactly. And that's where the power of sparking and maintaining situational interest really comes in. Researchers like Heedy strongly argue that this can be a really effective way to motivate students, even those who don't have a pre-existing individual interest in the subject.
So focus on making the experience engaging.
Precisely. By making the material itself more engaging, using those factors we talked about, like novelty, vivid language, clear explanations, connecting it to their lives, making it relevant, you can grab their attention and create that initial curiosity. It's about creating those aha moments or just making it less of a slog, drawing people in.
It's like creating an environment where interest can take root and maybe even grow, even if it wasn't there initially.
Exactly that. And while there's been a lot of focus historically, on the difference between intrinsic motivation, like individual interest, and extrinsic motivation, like grades or rewards,
Right, the classic distinction.
there's a growing recognition now that situational interest plays this really crucial, perhaps underappreciated role in learning. Especially for those students who might not be intrinsically motivated initially, it can be a powerful tool for getting them started, keeping them engaged, and helping them make progress.
That seems especially important considering that, well, research shows that as kids get older, their general motivation for academic learning can sometimes dip, even if their interests in other things outside of school remain strong.
Exactly. That's a well-documented trend, unfortunately. As learning gets more complex and demands more effort in middle school and high school, it becomes even more important to find ways to spark and maintain that interest. It's not just nice to have, it might be necessary.
So we need strategies to keep things engaging.
We do. And the good news is that because we're starting to understand so much more about how interest works, the triggers, the effects, the underlying processes, we can actually be more intentional about increasing motivation to read and learn. And that's a really encouraging thought, I think, for anyone involved in education or just trying to learn something new themselves. It's an achievable goal.
Okay, so to kind of bring it all together then, it sounds like interest, whether it's that deep-seated individual passion or just a spark of situational curiosity in the moment, is absolutely vital for how well we engage with and learn from reading.
It really seems to be.
By understanding these different kinds of interests and what makes them happen, novelty, clarity, relevance, engagement, we can make more informed choices about what we read and how we approach learning. The goal is making it both more effective and, yeah, more enjoyable too.
hmm The research really shows that interest isn't just some fluffy, nice-to-have bonus. It seems to fundamentally change how our brains process information, how deeply we engage, and how much we ultimately remember and understand.
It's about tapping into that natural human curiosity and making learning a more active and, well, interesting journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So for you listening, I want to leave you with this to think about. Remember the last time you were completely lost in something you were reading, just totally engrossed?
Yeah, that flow state.
What was it about that topic or the way it was written, or maybe even just how you were feeling at the time that just completely held your attention?
Yep.
Could you intentionally try to find or even create similar conditions in the future to really deepen how you engage with whatever you're trying to learn next?
It's a really interesting question to explore for yourself. What makes you interested?
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.